We are here for the Decarcerate Minnesota meeting with the Minnesota Department of Corrections and Commissioner Schnell. We're here because we believe that if there's not a new crime, there shouldn't be a new time. And we're here also around shared values to shrink the prison population and reinvest money in solutions. We also have an agenda. Does everyone have that little half sheet?
Hold on a second.
We need one over here. Yeah, looks like that.
Hey, can I add something to this agenda?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And actually, we need to change it slightly, so that's perfect.
That's good.
You wanna add it right now? What do you want to add?
I want to add discussion of the Department's strategic plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you mind if we put that with number 5?
That's fine.
Yeah, we're in the meeting right now. Okay.
DOC strategic plan, and also the person who's running number 2 is running behind, so we're actually going to move number 2 to after number 3. So it's going to be 1, 3. So we're going to start with the updates on specific commitments, and also just we have an agenda, so we're going to try to speak to what's on there. If you have something else you want to say that's not on the agenda, you can talk with folks afterwards. Though if something really pressing that later comes up, obviously we can do that. I guess we should get started. Do people want to quick say names?
Options, and we would be kind of given some ideas, and ultimately jurisdictions would be required to submit an updated plan and what they believe the outcomes they could achieve for that plan. We'd go to Curtis as the Deputy Commissioner over Field Services, and he would be working with the counties to kind of put that stuff in place. So those are really that's exactly where we sit on that, and I feel good about it. The response has been, despite the fact that it's a changing process, it is something that has been, I think, really well regarded by the counties, and I think the other thing I would just say is that whether we agree or not or don't agree, one of the things that makes it a bit easier for some of the counties to kind of do this is because remember that our population today is down between 400 and 500 per day, based on the fact that we changed, the DOC unilaterally changed some of the HRU requirements for violation around restructure, and what that essentially resulted in was an unfunded mandate for counties, that they're going to pick up additional supervision and managing folks in the community, and without additional resources for that. And that's one of the things that we really made clear to the governor and lieutenant governor when we met with them and talked about this, and how important this was. And I think you'll see when Josh talks a little about the strategic plan about how some of this stuff relates.
I have just one question. Okay, so would they now consider the men's group at church a part of his treatment stuff? See, the PSI workers would not let my son go to the men's group at church here. He would have ultimate support and resources and able to talk through things, and they just said no.
So I think those things would be part of the plan stuff that Curtis would be working with those with agents and with the counties on. Again, we're looking at how do we most comprehensively and collectively provide support to keep people in the community and help them do well, whatever that looks like. Again, so I can't say as a collective a policy, but I think that is what Curtis would be looking at and working with the county.
Maybe to go with one of the expectations, part of it, what we've been, and I'm sorry, introduce myself, Curtis Shankly, Deputy Commissioner of Corrections. Did we already go around and do introductions?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, sorry. But that'll be part of what we're looking to do is to make sure that counties, to be able to seek this funding that we're looking to get allocated during the supplemental budget, would be that they have to show in their comprehensive plan that they submit that there's a lot of intentionality going toward, as the Commissioner just alluded to, doing everything they can to keep those in the community, and also look at ways they can reduce actually the total number of those who are on probation to get those numbers down.
This is not something the church is asking for funding for. He's very, very involved in his church, and to be able to go to the men's group is very supportive for his mental well-being when released.
Yeah, it's
That's
no,
where
no, no.
it's come from.
It's not about the appropriation of dollars to the church. It's that when those type of services are available, that the counties are making sure that they're doing an in-depth look to make sure that they're not putting up a bunch of red tape, to make sure those who are amenable to those services, that they're giving them an opportunity to take advantage of those if it's going to be conducive toward them continue to be successful.
So something we should follow up on that. Is this about this specifically?
Well, I just want to ask, were they going to possibly see about culturally specific treatment programs?
That's a component of this.
Yeah, that was one of the main things that we've been talking about, specifically when you talk about that there is a lack of programming, but now that we're looking to develop new programming, that it is cultural specific. I actually met with a couple folks after leaving here to get them to actually submit me proposals for programming that they've been working on, community partners that are cultural specific, to see ways in which we can get them incorporated, not into facilities, but some type of working group that's out in the community that those can have access to. So not just cultural specific, but I should also say gender specific too as well, because that's one of the other things that's missing, particularly for our African American women, our Native American women's program that's just specific to them too. That's also a necessity too as well.
That sounds good. Appreciate it. And if we can have the implementation 1 month late with training, that sounds great. Should we go to the next one, appeals process?
Yeah, so this is one of those areas that we're also still having conversations about. We are trying to put in place. So one of the things that we think can happen is that if we do a better job of creating clarity about what constitutes violation and what represents more clear and present danger, that appeals issues may be less. And again, remember, in order to get access to that process, you have to submit a report. That's gonna go through. We think that in part these are some of the things that will actually create some change itself. Just that there's that level of rigor has to be applied prior to making a decision about taking an action with regard to the violation. We've been talking about this becomes one of those places where ultimately we talked a little bit about the way the promulgated rules list and that the executive officer of hearing and release is by rule has the authority of appeal. We also know that under no circumstance does even the rule alleviate the ability for the commissioner, who is ultimately legally responsible, and by virtue of this, the deputy commissioners, to do that. The one thing that we're trying to really address is what I don't want to do is have a quote-unquote court that ultimately goes automatically to appeal on every case, because what ends up happening is, why have a court in the first place? If you don't have legitimacy in the first part of your process, then what ends up happening is appeal should be for appeal of legitimate issues. And so this is one of the challenges, because the last thing I want to do is establish a new process that says, the deputy commissioner is going to be doing the appeal process. Then he may as well be the hearing officer, and that's not what this is about. Because I think part of this is about is a heavy emphasis on restructure, and remember, we are as committed to and framing this in a way that ultimately reduces, in addition to the benefits to those people who wouldn't be sent back, we're also really committed to trying to reduce our prison population so that we can do better by the folks that are there. We also believe that, and this is the tangential benefits of some of this, of even some of these things, is that by doing this process, by cleaning up this process and by investing in the community's ability to respond to the needs of folks, the benefit is not just for supervised releasees, but it actually has benefit for probationers who are subject to execution of their sentence.
So, because I'm trying to wrap my mind around
the process that we're talking about. And so it's the appellate process itself. When you say restructure, what are you talking about? Restructuring the appellate process specifically, or are you talking about in general?
Well, the restructuring the conditions, it could be restructuring the conditions, but I'm concerned about just saying that there will be, that the process is going to be, I want to know by virtue of the changes that we make to the way we manage violations in the starting point, what does that mean from an appeal standpoint? Because I don't want to create an appeals process that ultimately says every case is going to be decided by him or by me. Because I don't think that that's smart. It's not good process.
What creates the problem though is that, by and large, nobody ever wins on that level, period level.
Yeah.
And that creates that process as far as the person would have to definitely have an appeal.
I don't see that. I believe that we're going to see, I think we're going to see something to change in terms of these types of outcomes. I honestly believe that we're going to see changes in the way this looks. First of all, I think we'll have fewer people coming in for in custody. I think fewer. We're still going to have people coming in. There's no doubt. But far fewer. And I think number one and number two, we are putting heavy emphasis on. The goal is management of folks in the community. And that, remember, one of the other things that when we talked about the totality of this process, when we looked at this funding is really about the outcome of reducing and managing these folks in the community. So this, again, this appeals process, will there be a need for appeals? Probably. But what I don't want to do is create a process that ultimately gets applied today that we think is going to be largely addressed through some of the changes in the way we systemically manage these cases.
So I tell you what some of my concerns are specifically with the appellate process is that it's housed all within the same unit within the DOC, and that's atypical for some of the other disciplinary proceedings. For instance, someone inside of I don't know, Stillwater would have a hearing, and then if found guilty, they would be able to appeal, but it wouldn't go to the HRU. It would go outside of the HRU. So I believe the warden or something like that would have like the last say, or
it comes back ultimately. It's the commissioner's responsibility.
Right. So then that takes it outside of that. So that's for all of the inmates who are incarcerated. And but my concern though is that out here the liberty interest is significantly higher. And I think that because the liberty interest is, so you have people who are out here paying, rent, paying for a car, living life, have a job. And so the liberty interest is extraordinarily high, which to me, it seems as though since there are pretty strong protections for the appellate process for people who are incarcerated, for people who are being violated, I would imagine that the appellate process would be equally, at the minimum, equally protected.
So I'm not even going to disagree, but I will just say this, that the appellate process, to change the appellate process to go outside of the DOC is outside of the DOC's ability to implement. That's a statutory change because right now, the burden of the management of all of these things fall exclusively to the responsibility of the Commissioner of Corrections. And so anything outside of that would require the establishment of a different process. So I think Will talked the last time about the ALJ was what New York did. And so they use an administrative law judge that handles that part of the process.
So I would say that it's within the purview and under the mandate of the DOC commissioner, in that you would just simply be diverting those appeals from being within the HRU division to, let's say, under one of the deputy commissioners or to you yourself.
Well, that's what I was saying. Mm-hmm. That's what I was saying would be the case.
But I think but also I think what the commissioner was saying though, in doing that though, it does nothing though from our standpoint to also change the culture with the way in which they go about getting to the point of needing a hearing. So that's not to say though that we're going to take our eye off of not looking at those appeals, to your point, to make sure that those who come through, that they are done in a way that's objective and impartial. So we're going to still keep an acute focus on that. But rather than circumventing that process where essentially it lets those people who we pay to be in those positions to actually do the job they're supposed to do, is to give them opportunity while we go through this process to make changes themselves to adhere to that, rather than kind of side swiping that say everything comes to me. Well, then I might as well go in and take care of the whole HR process. HRU process.
I don't think that that's what that means. I think that it means that right now, the appellate process is housed all within HRU, and that's problematic. That might even be a due process problem.
Yeah.
And so it's to me, it's not an either and, it's either or. It's yes, let's take care of the cultural problem, but then let's also take care of the potential due process issues from making sure that there's a stronger avenue to take care of an appeal.
And I'm willing to do that. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't want to do that until we implement some of these other changes, because right now, today, but I think, I don't want to be in a position where we're hearing an appeal on every case, which is what I'm concerned would be the case. I want to implement these process changes that I think will make a difference.
We'll take a step and so we can move on.
Can I just ask a real important, maybe I'm just the dumb one in the room, just a backup question. Can we shift back to, can you define, I heard the term appellate process, and like, can you start with the beginning of what any process is now, and then what did you have in mind? So when you say there's an appellate process, where does that begin? Where is it housed? Who is that involved right now? And then what is your vision? How would it shift?
So
who's involved? Who's in charge of what? Just for everybody in the room.
Okay, so
y'all might know, but people might not know. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So today what happens is the agent would do their violation. It comes in, it gets assigned to a hearing officer. That hearing officer would hear that case, make a determination.
They're housed in the HRU.
They're in HRU. And by the way, the promulgated rules are listed today, that if there is an appeal, a hearing officer is a hearing officer. And if there's an appeal, it comes back to the executive officer of hearings and release, who oversees that unit. And that person, Rebecca Holmes Larson, she would review that appeal and make a decision about whether or not that the appeal is going to be granted or not. And what I'd like to see that process continue, but if I had my druthers, I'd like to see, after we implement this, that what we would, these changes I talked about at the beginning, just, the process and these tying some of these dollars and their plan stuff, because all that stuff connects. What would happen is that I would like to see a dual sign-off process on that happen. So if the executive officer of hearing and release would make a determination on that, on whether or not to grant an appeal, and that gets signed off on by someone at the commissioner level. Primarily, it would be the deputy commissioner over community services, or me, and in the situation where he's not available. Because that way, what it is, there's a secondary review.
Yeah, I think let's have this discussion internally, because we got to be careful about what we wish for. Number one, we wish for drug courts. Just expanded this net binding, and drug courts are racially biased and are a disaster. So the more courts we ask for, the more people end up in prison. So let's have this discussion internally before we make a.
Let's see what's up. Yes, and then we should move on to the topic.
Now, right now, you're talking about people just on the outside. Because I heard somebody mention inside the prisons too about their appeal process, and I would like to see the appeal process move outside of the prisons, because I've been hearing stories about, about the so-called chain of command, about the appeals go up, and then all of a sudden they're denied, okay? And then some people are in the hole for no reason, like say, for instance, 9 days, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, you're innocent, But the appeal process didn't work properly because it was going through the chain of commands inside the prison, and I would like to see it moved outside.
That's fair. I mean, that's a whole another conversation of a restructure that we're trying to address just based on the restrictive housing.
It seems like you
Just one question though, follow up point. When you say outside, you mean just like outside completely to a completely neutral? What are your thoughts?
One thing, after the ombudsman who's here, if his staff or somebody here at the DOC here could look at the kite and look at what's going on, because there's a lot of times where people on the inside, like the COs, they're all friends. And one CO says something, and the other one says, "Oh yeah, I'll back you up on that one," and they go ahead and do what they want to do.
Okay.
And then the people that suffer are the inmates inside, and it's not getting out to the public.
sounds like you spoke to shifting to the community a little bit in terms of that request for funding. Is there anything else y'all want to add for that?
Are you want to talk about anything in your bill stuff, or you want to wait to that
We'll
later?
wait till
Okay,
five.
all right. Because there's an element of this in here that I want to
I
address.
just wanted to bring up, I don't know if you remember, but last meeting we asked you to look into Timothy Barry's case.
Yeah, and I'm not going to address a case
That's
in
fine,
here.
but the issue, again, that's important is that people are being held on treatment mandates and held for another year and year.
So-
if you want to, I just
Yeah,
asked.
so let me just talk about treatment mandates issues, because this is something that and I can't get into the decision making, because we're looking at this. So one of the things that we know is that we are having, and this is a not a DOC problem, it's a Minnesota problem. It's actually our ability to hire treatment personnel, treatment staff, has been really challenging because the demand for people working in treatment, we've been struggling to keep people and fill positions. We have many open positions, and so why I'm concerned about that is that we for exactly some of the reasons you're talking about, we put treatment directives on people. And then we have our own capacity problems that we had already, just because we're trying to manage the people that are inside. But now add to that the fact that we're struggling to hire, which has bigger things. And so we're having some meetings with some people in the community. We are looking at, we have to vet all this stuff. So I don't want to get too far ahead of this, but it's one of the things that we're really looking at is, can we use things like conditional release stuff and where we might focus more on release planning. So we connect people with the needed treatment resources and direct them directly out to that in the community. That's one of the things that we're working on.
And that's exactly the situation with Timothy Barr, in that he was violated for 365 days or less. He's been since told that he needs to be in there for 4 years. 40 months rather, almost 4 years, to finish a treatment directive. He has a letter from a treatment provider in the community saying that they will take him in the community. So he's basically being held well beyond what he was sentenced. And there's a lot of people, particularly people with sex crimes, who are constantly renewed on this. So just wanting to raise that issue, and he's just asking to be able to allowed to do release planning. He has a very low MinStar score. He's anyway. So looking at that, and also this is an issue that affects many people. So appreciate that. You got a quick thought on that?
I hope it's quick. I am a mental health professional, former treatment provider for corrections and community corrections. And one of the questions that I have is, is there any evidence to suggest that you actually need many treatment providers inside? Because my experience and my understanding of some of the evidence suggests that it is better outside, but also, and then maybe that's more of a bridge or a connection to a brief contact, the agency that's outside comes inside to make the contact, build rapport, do the assessments, build the stuff, and then in the community. Because I worked in it, and I know it's hard to fill the positions, and certainly to make them culturally responsive is an even bigger challenge. And then you throw in language barriers or languages and everything else, and it's a tremendous barrier. So with that, I'm curious, what's the evidence that you would want to keep doing that or in that fashion?
So I would just say that when we look at some of the the evidence around treatment effectiveness, we are seeing. And part of that's
I'm not
just.
negating it
No,
needs to be
part
that
of
at
part
all,
of this
of
is
course.
dosage, right?
Yep.
When we look at dosage, a lot of the treatment programs tends to be a lot more dosage in DOC-based programs. And what we know is that dosage and outcome or success, it does show some correlation. And so that's the evidence. Again, that doesn't mean we should hook people up for a long time waiting for a resource that we can't provide. And I think then we should look to try and create or build or identify creative options in the community to address those needs.
I was going to say something real quick. For instance, if I use a computer, right, or an application on the computer, there's multiple ways to get to that same goal. Like I can call Control-C, Control-V for copy-paste or highlight selected, right? Applying that same method to treatment practices that are currently doing, I mean, there's more than one way to fix a solution, and we keep going back to the traditional way of doing things, and sometimes those aren't always as effective. There's other ways to do it, kind of like what Mr. Saluki was saying about culturally specific programs or other community-based programs, as you were talking about. There's other programs that are out there in existence that are more effective, and there are plenty of people to testify to that, than going through some of these traditional programs.
And I can't argue with you. I can't disagree.
Thanks. Sorry, quick. I guess we got two more quick.
I'd just like to add to that about the treatment programs and the sex offenders. I know for a fact that you can have a job, you can be in treatment, and you cannot be then committed another crime, and you still go back to prison. You have housing, you have everything, and if you have a parole officer that has a personal something against you, they'll build a case over nothing. My son's rotting in prison right now for that same thing.
Yeah.
And if you go over his case, you'll see that every time he got out, and if the HRU went through the file, he had a job, the people wanted him back, they would take him back even after he sat in jail for 30 days because he's a good man, he's a good person, and he's done everything he's supposed to do. Now he's sitting up in Faribault with no type of treatment program, and he could be outside in treatment. And so that's my assessment.
We just got a call at our office, same thing.
Now, this is just a suggestion. Okay, Totem Town's closed down. And I suggested to somebody that maybe it could be opened up for a treatment facility which would keep people out of going back to prison, but send them there. And that's something that has to be set up. And they have to get workers, people employed there. I don't know what type of facility. I know it was a juvenile place. And I don't know if it's a barracks or if it's rooms or what it is, but it can be looked at and modeled if need be. But I think that might be something that would be able to keep people out of prison. And since it's already there, it's like a small campus.
Right.
I just want to say we already 2 minutes over this whole section, so partially my bad, but just like try to stay on task.
Thank you.
Did anyone else get you on a question?
Just want to tell you what the real joke is. You know, when you go to those Rule 25s inside prison, everybody says, don't tell them that you had a drink even 20 years ago. And what's creating the backlog is that if you say you had a drink 20 years ago, you get a treatment mandate, which is unrealistic. So maybe we should look at that a little bit, because that's what's making people, when they come in for like 90 days, and then they have to wait 6 months to even get a bed. And that's the thing that we need to look at.
But I want to just go back to the fact that if we do right by this new process, we focus on accessing those resources before they get back in the system. We want to, even if it's a warrant situation where we issued a warrant, Ramsey, as a for instance, is looking at a project right now for some release filers that they lose contact with, you can't find, right? And so let's issue that warrant, but within 48 hours, have a community-based treatment provider do an assessment in the jail, and the whole focus is to flip that as quickly as possible and get them out back into their job, whatever it may have been, and address that issue. So that's exactly what this whole goal is. Remember, is to try and reduce bringing people back, because that's not in our best interest. We know that. We hear that, and yet we feel compelled to make sure that there's a system that can provide and address those issues.
Should we move to CIP?
Yeah.
Great. CIP updates?
CIP updates, we have, we have a couple of issues going on here. So we've had a number of some legal challenges that we're working through, and some of this we may end up needing to go in and address via the legislative session, and some legislators are raising some issues. So right now, there's one of the ways to address a response earlier is that if there is not a find of a material violation, and the issue is, the question is what's material. And some of these conversations, I think, really create a situation where now there is interest, we've heard by some in the legislature, to define material. So we are in a position where any kind of evidence that would be contrary to the established conditions, there are those who argue that is material. Now, when we think about the question of material, we were looking at is there material indication that this person poses a risk, or that there isn't other kinds of intervention options? CIP has developed. They have put together a CIP reboot that has been designed. It's ready to go. One of the things that I just asked them to add to this was to identify some domestic violence programming that meets the statutory requirements for folks who are in the community, and so they're working to put that stuff together. But we are trying to work through this whole question of what the legal status is going to be with regard to the question of material, and that may end up having to be a legislative.
I wonder whether or not, just in terms of a quicker path, whether or not your legal department will consider it sufficient if the AG's office issued an opinion about the statutory definition of material in that regard. Would that be sufficient?
There is some conversations happening with the AG's office on this issue.
I think about the legislature, we have,
I know.
There's a divide there, and so we may not necessarily at the end of the session get to, that being defined.
I mean, that our goal, it would be to be able to use the reboot as one option, or other types of restructure options to address these violations. But we also have to, we just are in a place where we have to compel to comply with the law. And so the one place that we thought we had some potential leeway was determination of material. So.
Do you have a timeline for implementing the reboot?
So they're ready to go on elements of this, and we can, one of the big challenges for them was, how do you start a reboot when you have people that are on, they're actively in different phases of that program. But I think they've come up with a plan for how to do that. The challenge really is we're not going to implement until we have some of this legal question addressed. But we're there. It's just we have work to do. And
months, weeks, years.
I'm hopeful. There has been conversations, as was pointed out, with AAG's office around that. But we want to be smart about how we do this. And if we can get there that way, that's ideal.
Right, but, so how does the material violation and the risk and that how does these assessments, how's that's gonna affect somebody who's been sent back to prison, who was not a risk and didn't put in the appeal, and it wasn't, you know, I mean, I don't know. My son's been in for 10 months now.
Right.
It's just getting crazy, ridiculous for doing nothing, but doing everything he was supposed to do. And then the HR was just a joke. You know, it was a joke. So PSI, or whatever agents, they just went in there and said what they wanted to say and disregarded everything he said, and there was no proof of anything. So how can there be a new charge when you had no chance to defend yourself against anything? The attorney tried, the attorney sent the appeal in, everything was just disregarded. How does that work?
That's the old way.
So if we implement a CIP reboot, is that gonna apply to people in prison now, I guess is part of the
So I think
because that's a whole pool of people who could all be rebooted at once.
but I got this, so here's the question. Go right back to the whole question of, was the violation material in the first place?
No.
That's the determination.
So if we got a determination from the AG's office, then we'd be in a position to make that.
These are the questions, because the whole issue of if HRU made a determination that violation was material, retroactivity could be a challenge. And I think these are, again, this is the complexity of the problem. That's more than that. So I'm just being honest.
Yeah, and I would imagine that could also be part of the opinion issued by, in terms of retroactivity and structure moving forward. I think that could be comprehensive in its nature to like really help to provide.
I would look at that statute very carefully, because I think you're going to find that there's going to be a bit of reluctance on that one, just because of the nature of the legislative intent. That's really clearly communicated.
Last thing on this is, and you've communicated with folks about this, the case of Jeffrey Core, and the fact that he was credited for phase 2 time, in terms of getting out early, where almost no one else on CEIP is credited. So we're wondering if that's going to start shifting where people are getting credited for their phase 2 time.
This was I asked a question about this, and it was the circumstances in this case are entirely different than any other that we can find.
In what way?
I'm not going to get into his determination of that particular case, but
But for the legal purposes of other people knowing, what are the conditions?
When the records review was done, and the Census Administration folks looked at the time served with us and the time served prior, that was the earned credit, and that credit was applied.
Can you break that down again? Because I'm actually not understanding.
Because, so there's time, you have time served in prison, and you have time served prior. That was never applied to his original sentence, is my understanding. So remember, because time served, and that was now then later applied,
Okay.
which reduced his.
So you're saying it was previous time served, not CIP time?
Precisely, it's not CIP time.
That makes sense. Okay. Quick updates on Know Your Rights stuff. You want to say that?
Yep, quick update. So, actually, I just spoke with the paralegal. So we have a paralegal right now that's looking at various different parameters for how the Know Your Rights is going to look. Within 2 weeks, we're going to have a skeletal framework where they're going to all meet and help to provide a little bit more meat on top of that. And then probably a week to 2 weeks after that, we'll have a draft in which we'll bring to you all.
You guys working on, are the PDs involved with that, the public defenders?
No. So we have our staff attorneys.
Okay. Will you guys be coordinating with them at all?
Yeah, we will.
The public defenders? Okay.
Yeah, not at this point.
No, but when you're.
Once we have our larger meeting.
That's great. Perfect.
Eli, could you just, sorry I'm coming to this late, just really quickly describe what the Know Your Rights program is? What rights for who?
Yeah, so essentially, the Know Your Rights program is ACLU's attempts, and many other organizations' attempts to help to apprise individuals and organizations what their constitutional rights are in any given situation, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about students, just apprising people of what their rights are in given situations. And so we're currently working to create a Know Your Rights handbook
For
individuals.
For inmates or?
Subject to,
These
really
are people
subject
who
to
are,
revocation.
subject to
Revoc,
violation.
oh, okay, thank you.
So essentially, when they come in, they will be given the handbook in which they'll be able to read through and have information about how things could look and then what some of their rights are.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions about that? Otherwise, we're going to go to changing culture. Anything else on that? Just want to talk to you.
Oh, sorry.
Good to see you.
I'm having trouble seeing everybody, so I don't know if you can see me. Just briefly, so I've had a few conversations about cultural change with a couple of people here in the room. What we're looking at, what our concern is, and what we've expressed before is that if you have top-down change, but you don't do anything to change the minds or the hearts of the people who are on the ground working with the clients, it's very likely that the top-down change is not going to stick. It's very likely that they're going to find ways to work around it, ways that align with their values and not necessarily with yours.
Or this group's, or the communities, right?
Exactly. So we've spoken before, the suggestion being that there be some training to address this, some union to union training, so that individuals who are working on the ground level have an opportunity to explore their own biases, take a look at themselves, and see if we can make some change that way. That training in and of itself isn't going to be enough, but it's difficult, uncomfortable conversations and challenges, as you well know, because we've had many of them here in this room.
Yeah, I love it, I do.
So that's something that we're exploring right now. It's something that I'm personally working on and have brought in some other labor organizations in on. And we would very much like to have the opportunity to bring in some community members in on this type of training as well, so that parole officers, probation officers can also hear from the individuals who are directly affected by the decisions that they make.
I agree. That's phenomenal. And I would just say, when Josh's time comes up and talk about the strategic plan, I think that it's going to be super aligned. So that's great.
And it's also a good time, and just because we're currently looking at our onboarding process, both at the academy for those going into the facility, but also those who go through on the community service side, the academy. So that's one of the things I brought up was specifically, and the commissioner touched base on this, around how do we get specific training to those who are just coming into the academy around race equity, around inclusion, so that's dovetails right into that. So if that's something you're working on and we can make a connection, particularly those going straight into the academy, then let's do that.
Yes, absolutely.
The other thing I would just say, I just want to share this because I think it was really cool. We last night I got home this morning about 1 a.m. We went out to Portland and met with a whole group of folks from Norway. And really looking at the Norway system stuff and talking about the ways in which the work they're doing there, which really focuses on this whole notion of, if ultimately 95% of the people that are in our correctional facilities are going to be coming out and one day be our neighbors, how do we do the business of corrections to actually really create good neighbors? And so it's to me it was a great meeting. We're really excited about the prospect of being able to work with them in a variety of different ways and places throughout, and both on the community services side as well as on the institution side. And I would just say that people in that country have who've been involved in some of the most horrific crimes, things that were big, like that guy who shot like 78 kids at that camp, are in those places, and they're treated very differently. They get a very different outcome, and I think it speaks to the fact that there is accountability. But there is recognition of the fact that these are human beings who are one day going to be our neighbor, and let's set them up in the best way possible to achieve that.
Quick question here.
Yeah, so I've read about programs in other parts of the country, and you may know more about these, Commissioner, where they do trauma-informed training with community and law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I don't know the evidence. Anecdotally, it sounded like it was successful. Are you looking at that?
Absolutely.
And that was a big part of some of the stuff we went through yesterday, out there in Portland. We've been heavily invested in the trauma-based stuff.
Do you want to say anything more about striking attitudes, or is that later?
No, I think that's part of the bill.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure. And Steph? And then one more thing on this.
I mean, I could save it for the end, I guess, but,
No, say no.
I mean, I guess I'm looking through somebody's kind of pile of kites and disciplinary stuff and communications, and it's just honestly disgusting and embarrassing because it's somebody who is going through this system, and all of these reports that are filled out by staff this is somebody who's been put in SEG for mistakes. It says it on here, we made mistakes, sorry. Why, we don't know why you're grieving, just, this is the most disgusting part of the culture, because this is a culture of, I'm not sure where you find these goose-stepping fascist type of guards who are basically telling this young man, oh, you shouldn't have gotten in an argument. And it's here like 4 times. Different guards are like, you shouldn't have gotten in an argument and your father shouldn't have made a mistake. But they're also admitting in here that we made a mistake. Sorry, but we don't understand. They're accusing this person of using kites in this, what do you call it? In an aggressive way, or using kites to kind of shame the staff. But all I'm seeing from the staff is, you shouldn't have argued, you shouldn't have argued, you shouldn't have argued, you shouldn't have argued, you shouldn't have been arguing, that time you were arguing was a problem, this is all dated back to this time you were arguing. No context is here. There's nothing about why the person started arguing. It's just this very black and white punisher, victim, and it's this dichotomy. It's basically like, you're a villain, so you shouldn't have been arguing, and your father shouldn't have made a mistake. So now you're gonna go in the hole, again, whoever said they're building a case, that's what happens. And I need y'all to understand that that's the culture. The culture is, you have a bunch of guards who have a bunch of authority, and the families and people that are dealing with this are using all of the legal means they have to talk about their situation. However, you're able to sit here and say, oh, well, you messed up, oh, you messed up, oh, you messed up, oh, you messed up, oh, your father made a mistake, oh, you messed up. But why are you complaining? Why are you complaining? It's so awful. And so we hear this changing culture, I think that's the first thing that we need to look at is like I said, I feel like you have a bunch of staff that are out here looking to literally punish people or looking to treat people as not human, because they're the sum of their mistakes or their father's mistakes or whoever's mistakes. And then it says in here something about, oh, why are you complaining? You were found innocent of what happened, of what you claim happened, but nothing happened except what you want to say. Nothing happened except you want to say. So that it's just, it's awful. It's awful.
I have to say something.
And I'm sorry to.
No, that's okay.
I can't even read this.
Because the father that made the mistake was me. I forgot to take my wallet out of my pocket because I was thirsty. I stopped by Goodwill to get some water. I put my wallet in my pocket. When I came into the visiting room, they said, oh, your wallet, is that your wallet in your back pocket? I'm like, oh, yeah, it is. So I couldn't take it back out to the car because, they said, no, you can't do that. The visit is terminated.
And then it becomes,
Period.
why are you mad that that
Okay,
happened?
and then Amani says something, he's trying to get hold of somebody, they said, oh, you're arguing, what are you doing? He was in the wrong. And then, about part of the argument is, this is after the graduation you was at, about the art thing, Officer Kelly, he's upset about something, so he started arguing with Amani, and Amani started arguing back to him, and the next thing he knows, he's in the hole. Now, the other part was when the mistake came, he's in B West, and he has what's it called, a roomie, or whatever that's called. Yeah, cellie. And so the cellie says something inappropriate to a female guard. Okay, so the guy says, oh no, I know that, that's Amani's voice. And so he goes to the hole. That's the mistake, and they found him innocent. Why are you complaining? You spend 9 days in the hole for something you didn't do, but then you're in the wrong because you're writing kites to people. And the kites that he wrote, somebody else intercepted it. It wasn't even to that guy, okay? But this guy picked it up, writes to him, saying something, and he wrote back to her, and then she said, he's harassing me. And so it's this whole thing that now he is back in the art thing again, but this thing, and I'm still visiting him through this glass because I forgot to take my wallet out of my pocket.
I just wanted to bring it up. I only wanted to bring it up in culture.
No, whenever, just go ahead.
I only wanted to bring it up in culture because this feels like it doesn't matter. This is a whole document of kites, grievances, complaints. The whole story is here, but what does it matter if the whole story is documented? You know what I mean?
But
and there's no motion on it.
The guard should have
That's the
recognized
issue.
it before he got through the thing. A simple solution. Common sense tells you, sir, can you dump out that water and throw away the bottle?
No, my wallet. My wallet.
Oh, your wallet.
I forgot to take my wallet out of my pocket. And so I asked him, I said, well, can't I take the wallet back to my car and come back in here? No, he can't do that. The visit's terminated, period.
Can we go here?
And common sense says you're not
that
the
was
first
one of the
person
reasons
to
I've
have
asked to have these kites outside of the prison where these guys are sitting up there. They're all friends, and if you take the time to look at these kites, you'll see the same thing that she saw.
I'll let people talk and then.
The moral of the story is the people that's locked up are being treated less than human.
Yes.
And that's the whole culture. What he talked about, them getting the training with coming in, but also possibly like a yearly training to go over this stuff. Because again, like she said, unless the hearts and the minds of people that are serving these people that are locked up change, then nothing else is going to change. I have talked to inmates and they have said we are treated like dogs. We are treated like we are not human beings because they made mistakes. And there's people in there with mental health concerns that need to be met.
Yes.
And they need their mental health concerns met, and they should be in a hospital, not in a prison. So, unless the trainings on culture, and maybe even making it so the community, they have to be out in the community and do a XYZ amount of hours in a culturally specific community before they can work in this environment, because they're providing services for people in this ethnicity, but they are not culturally understanding the struggles of this culture. And that's why you can't, it's almost like if I kill an ant on the floor, I'm not gonna care because it's not a human to me. It was just an ant, you know what I mean? But if I see it as a human, if I view it as a human, I'm gonna care more. So I'm just feeling like they're not seeing these inmates as human. When I'm seeing people laying on the floor where they didn't get the medical treatment they needed as a human being deserved, and I work with a mother that's going through that, this is showing me that these people are not being viewed as humans. So.
The guards, they take their authority and they take that authority and they run with it real far because they have each other to back each other up. Where the inmates, they have each other to back each other up, but their words don't mean anything to the guards. My brother is a lifer, and he's being involved in situations. Let me give you for instance, when he first got into prison, he was involved into some gang-related activity. He got himself out of that gang-related activity and told them, no matter the consequence with the people that he was dealing with, I'm done. And I don't want you guys talking to me no more. Leave me alone, whatever. For the past 10 years, he's been perfectly fine. He transferred prisons, ran across somebody who knew him before, and it just, now the guards are looking at him. He's a gang related and he's the head and he's this, and he's not. He's a man that has changed his life around completely. He's not the person. And I'm not just speaking because I'm his sister and saying this. I'm saying that my brother is not the person that he used to be. I'm saying that my brother is more humble than ever. Like I give him all the credit in the world. But he has these guards, and then the guards wonder why when there's riots and because they're human. They can only take so much. And then they keep picking and they keep probing and they keep picking and they keep probing, and they won't stop until 25 of them end up in SAG, and then SAG goes up, and then it's your guards. They need to know that the people that are inside these prisons are people's brothers, sisters, mothers, uncles, they have family. They are loved. I don't know if they look at them like because they're in prison, and sometimes some people can't make phone calls, or some people don't have money, and because of that, they don't have family that's going to look out for them. They have people on the outside that love them, and they need to realize that. I'm so fed up with it. I came all the way from Des Moines, Iowa. I came all the way from Des Moines, Iowa. I've been here since Monday morning. I sat outside in the parking lot from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. trying to get through to you or somebody associated with you because I'm up to here. I am up to here. I'm spending my rent money to stay in a hotel, to come here and look you in your face and say, your sister, the people that are under you are completely screwed up. I've made phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call, did not get no response. I've tried to talk to the lowest people in the prison, tried to talk to the highest people in the prison, left the warden of the prison 5 or 6 messages. I can't get nobody to call me back and talk to me while I'm in Des Moines, Iowa. So I figured I'd come to Minnesota. Now can somebody still talk to me? You know what? No, I'm still talking to a receptionist, and I understand that her job is to get rid of people. That's how I feel.
All right, so can I just say this? So tonight, when this meeting's over, you're gonna get your chance to talk to me directly. So
Thank you. And I'll be quiet from this point forward.
And just,
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
And
You're welcome.
also on culture, before we move on from this, and thank you everyone for all of this stuff. I think it's also worth thinking about the culture of how we deal with each other at this level too, because you can't flip a switch and have some guy change how they behave, right? But you can change how we operate here. And so stuff that's come up with that seems really important for making this work be able to be successful is one, this issue of retroactive changes. Because if you've got people's families here, you know what I mean? If you got people on supervision who want change for themselves, you know, and that's why they're fighting for themselves, and it's all the change is going to be someone in the future. That's not the kind of culture we want to make change. Another thing, people get repressed in doing this work, particularly people on the inside. Mm-hmm. And if you allow that to happen and don't intervene with that, which you can, for example, Angela Hooks is still sitting in a protective unit. She's still not got into CIP. If you don't protect the people who are the ones who are speaking out, who are making positive changes, who are organizing to try to make prison more safe, and you let them get stomped on, that's it's going to be hard for us to be partners. I'm still banned from all the facilities. It's going to, I mean, like I can't talk to my people right now. I can't be in facilities. So, you know, and then also if people in prison can't represent themselves and partner with people on the outside and form their own groups and actually have the ability to level some of these power dynamics, it's also going to be really hard to have sustainable change. So just wanted to put those things on your radar for real, because I think those things could make an incredible amount of impact for how we could work together and how much change we could accomplish together.
Duly noted.
I just want to say this. You mentioned Angela Hookson. That's one of my children in prison. She's done a lot of changes. My thing, I talked to her the other day, and it's awful. Here's Officer Lake, or whatever he is. He's been out, he had sex crimes or something with some women up there in Shakopee. But he was one of the people that kept my daughter from going to CIP and all that. Now he's back over. He went in her place, didn't even write a report the other day, talking about some ice packs. He's back harassing this woman. He shouldn't be nowhere near her. Nowhere near her. So that's what I got to say. They keep putting those apples in there and they're going to stick with each other. I used to be a person that worked with the police department, and I know the secretism of it. I was the first black 911 operator in St. Paul, and I worked up in the comm center with nothing but men, policemen that were thrown up there that didn't want to be there, didn't like their jobs. And if I was one of the people that wants to come out now with the movement that's out, it would be awful in St. Paul, okay? I would never do that, but I'm just saying, they keep putting these people that's doing the same thing back. He should be nowhere near my daughter. He's still trying to do something to her. He shouldn't be in that unit. Well, she shouldn't be in it either, but.
Yeah, and there's two.
And so I'm just trying to stay calm. I've been an activist for 99 years, and I hope things change. And I love the new commissioner, and we'll give him all his props, because I know he's trying. And that's what we need. But we got to get rid of some of these apples that's got all this. They're going to slap each other on the hand, high five, and I know that's not what the commissioner now wants. I know he doesn't want that, but he's got to clean it up some kind of way. I don't know how he's going to do it. But thank you.
That's something I brought before,
Thank
was
you.
to try to figure out how people can bring up complaints against these officers. Right now, there's nothing being done about it, and they can do what they want to do and get away with it.
So,
you know, and the only ones being punished are the inmates.
So let me just,
And those on ISR.
so let me just say that, first of all, there's not much more difficult than hearing these kinds of things. It's just I'm just being honest. I hate it. And one of the things that we know, and one of the things that that this agency has struggled with is we don't look at and collect the data, because we on any of these things, and this is one of the things that we have said is going to change. We are going to track who's imposing discipline inside, what that is. We're looking at the ways in which discipline time gets applied, numbers of charges, by race, by officer, so that we can actually begin to see where some of these things are happening, both on the institute facility side as well as on the community side.
Thank you.
And you think it should be just easy to flip a switch and be able to collect that data. Yeah. It's not quite as easy as that, but we're committed to getting there. Because I think until we start to be able to show it and look at it in more systemic ways, it becomes difficult. But I'm not here to defend anything that I've heard tonight. Nothing.
Thank you.
Can I just get in a word here?
The whole
Ha-
issue, you know.
Has the Department of Corrections ever hired a consultant to do a study of your organizational culture? My master's thesis was in studying an organizational culture. And until you can change the organizational culture, first you have to know what the culture is. You can't change what's going on with this people writing kites and people retaliating until you understand how your culture works, where it is, what needs to be changed in it. Second of all, the very foundation of due process says that you are not going to be punished for using due process. It's an acceptable way of addressing grievances. It is an outlet for people. Instead of using violence, they have to understand that, hey, we're going to use the grievance process, but in order to encourage them to do that, it has to work. There has to not be retaliation for it. Even the grievances that you might feel are not the best or well-written or addressing things have to be addressed and taken seriously in order for people to say the system works. If I write a grievance and I know it's just going to be given to somebody, they're going to show it to the person who the grievance is about, he's going to start coming by my cell and harassing me, it's a farce. It has to be somebody really outside of the system, maybe it's the ombudsman, maybe it's somebody else, who kind of oversees that to make sure that serious issues are addressed and taken seriously. Because otherwise, what happens? They start throwing feces out the chuck hole. I've been there. You know, I've done 18 years, so you know I know how it goes. You know, I've been in the worst prisons in Illinois. You know, if you don't have an outlet, if people don't feel like it's a system that's going to be fair, they're going to find other ways to address it. It's in your best interest to make sure that system is fair.
Right, and so I would just say, so I think, you know, the Ombudsman is here tonight, and I think that, you know, that is certainly an outlet. I think we want to be clear, though, the Ombudsman does not run the Department of Corrections, and I think that's the bottom line. The Ombudsman has a really significant role in terms of addressing these systemic kind of issues of lack of due process and responsiveness and those sorts of things. But if the Department of Corrections, if we don't change it, an Ombudsman, hell, a governor, a legislature, you aren't going to legislate a change in culture. It just does. I think that was your whole point, right? It's you're not going to legislate that. I think what we are, you know, look, these conversations are as painful as they are for you and painful as they are for us, I think in many respects, and because we want it to be different. And I think we do have a pretty good sense of the culture. There is also, I should tell you, is that we know that there was an OLA report that's going to be coming out, Office of Legislative Auditor report on prison safety that's going to be released probably before the end of February, we're guessing. Because they've been doing that at the request of the legislature for the last 6 months, something like that, Josh, I think. And so that report's going to come out, and that report is going to address everything from process, practice, to assaults, to discipline, to they looked at everything, and we don't know the full extent of what that report's going to address or going to have, but it's going to be significant. We know that the legislative auditor was good enough to say to me a month or so, 2 months ago, saying it's going to be tough.
This is why it's so important for David's website, for David to be allowed back.
So I'm not going to.
This woman had to come all the way from Iowa, and I've tried for years, for years to get help, and until my son found someone in the prison, told him about his website, and I found these people, I got nowhere.
Yeah. So
I'd still be sitting at home bawling my eyes out if I hadn't have found David.
So I'm not going to address David here because that's not appropriate.
Yeah, just one more thing.
But it's right there.
There's a group of prisoners and families who are concerned about a minimum denial policy where people are getting sent out a minimum for minor infractions and therefore not getting to work release. Would you be willing to meet with those folks?
We're looking at that policy, but yeah, I'm happy to meet with them.
Okay, cool. They wanted to ask and confirm it. And here's just some information, 2 stories and some suggestions.
Well, you got it all here. I got want to read tonight.
Well, they wrote it, so I wanted to make
no,
sure.
I'm happy to.
Cool. So now we're going to move to number 4 on the agenda. I think that's Ed.
Is it the task force? Yeah. So just regarding accountability and things like that, we're also looking to be able to create a task force just to kind of talk with all of you here at the DLC, and also from a few of us and our community members. Just wanted to see if you'd be willing to be a part of that.
and sorry, specifically to include legislative and county folks, such that we can watch how this proceeds and we have access to data.
Yeah, so that the response is we'll do something. We're working on, as one of the strategies right now is the establishment of kind of a work group to do, and we want that to be quite broad. And so we may be talking about the same things, and that could be by executive order of the governor. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but there's going to be some things coming.
Will people here be invited to that working group?
Yeah, there would be designated representation or whatever. We don't, again, but we want people to have a voice, absolutely.
And do you have a timeline on that?
I don't know exactly, but we've been having talk about what this looks like with the governor and lieutenant governor and governor's office staff, and so we're working through that, and legislators as well in terms of what that would be, and the counties, and part of this stuff may tie to some of our legislative asks as we go through the session. So yeah, so the short answer is yes. What that looks like, we may be talking about the same things, and so yeah.
Well, let's move to number 5, and hopefully that will be in good time. That's Will on the technical violations.
Yeah, we'll do this really quickly so we can get to
Josh. Yeah,
so because there's not much to say except good news, right? Here's the first draft of the bill on technical violations. And we have Representative Dean has agreed to sponsor. So we will pledge full transparency. We've got it posted on at every step here. We've posted it on the criminal justice table stuff. We've posted all the way along. We've been fully transparent. So if anybody has input as we go along, because man, this is already on its like 8th draft or something like that. Just make sure that
You guys have been at it.
Yeah,
on the draft.
Yeah, we have. But I guess this is, we feel like we've done everything the DOC has asked at these meetings. You said, go to the legislature, start drafting some things, because it is important in this room to realize that Commissioner Schnell won't be here forever, and the next person could just completely reverse any progress we make, and we've seen that with President Obama. His signing statements meant nothing, right, when Trump became president. So it is important that we enshrine these things into law. I guess the one kind of depressing thing when we were on the Hill the other day was supposedly someone from the DOC said that this is too complicated and it's too expensive. So we hope from full transparency from the DOC as well. If there's stuff in here that doesn't, because we're amateurs and we don't know the terminology.
Trust me, I'm not a lawyer either. But
yeah, so if there's people inside the DOC that have qualms, and we'll always share it with you guys, and if there's anything in here that we're getting wrong.
We got a copy of Jamal sent me a copy of the bill language. Just we got it today or whatever. Some of the, and it's I think this is the most recent one.
Did it have the stuff about extended incarceration in there?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so it's got what we've been asking for this whole time, right? In terms of the 12, I think there's 12 things listed, technical violations that people cannot be sent back to prison for unless those start mounting up, right? And then it spells out what the if you do have some violations, it's a 7-day, 30-day, 90-day process. We need to work out that process right there on where people would be incarcerated. I don't know if anybody listened to Commissioner Schnell's testimony last week, but the ridiculousness of the cost of intake in Minnesota, like bringing in prisoners, giving them an ID and then sending them back out, driving them all the way to Line of Lakes. I don't know what kind of, yeah, I mean, we heard stories at the ACLU the other day. A guy drove to Line of Lakes, got his ID, and was discharged immediately. So we got to figure out more cost-effective ways on the county level to do that. We haven't worked that out in the bill yet, but that needs to be worked out. But what did you have? What did you talk about in terms of Shakopee? The sheer number of intake.
Yeah, it was 293 people were admitted to Shakopee in 2017 for less than 30 days.
Think about the cost of that, to drive them all the way to Shakopee from all over the state.
It was more than, it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars in total cost to process those people.
And there's good language in here about least restrictive always try to find the least restrictive sanction. And then we've added some now recently about people that get infractions while in prison and then get time extended. That's going to be, if this passes, completely eliminated, and it would be retroactive to people that are in prison currently. So if you got extra time tacked on your sentence because you made a mistake early on in your sentence, that would be eliminated in this bill. So it's a big ask, and we got a ton of work to do in here. Everyone in here has a ton of work to do to try to get this passed. It also, on the language part and the stuff that Yolanda brought up, we're trying to get some of this language out that has fostered this culture. So for instance, in intensive supervision, the first thing it says, the goal of intensive supervision is to punish the offender. Not rehabilitate the offender, but punish the offender. That came from those 1990s years, right? The other thing we're trying to get the language out is someone can be violated based on the offender's behavior, attitude. So the stuff you were talking about, right? Someone could be sent back because of their attitude. We're trying to get that language out of there as well.
Is there a short, sweet name or acronym for the bill that people can use informally, or is there?
We borrowed the New York, less is more Minnesota, but yeah, people have ideas, and we talked to about trying to get some nice artwork and everything, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, we'll get some artwork, but we need a final version here first. Got to make sure the
How about Chad Blake?
language is
Is there somewhere we can access the draft?
Yep, I got it.
Yeah, we'll make sure like I said, about the 7th, 8th version, so it's always been posted. And yeah, we'll continue to do that.
So just you want me to just, a couple of quick things that I just raised, right? So when I mean, you know, I've sent a lot of questions back, and there may be some, we may end up with more just definition kinds of questions, which we can work and tweak as we get through this. I'll tell you, I was concerned about the whole section that you guys removed about prior to revoking a nonviolent controlled substance released based on technical violation. Present that we look at the community-based treatment option stuff, because partially what that language is exactly what we're doing in these policy changes, right? With HRU. Whereas we're saying you have to assess the availability of resources in the community. You have to look at employment, implications for family, implications on housing, and implications on, and we're removing that. And actually, some of those things this language was kind of one of the things that was, along with the things I heard here, was the kinds of things that if the statute said these things must be taken into consideration. Now, we talked about this whole thing of how do you create policy that is lasting? It's really legislative, right? Because a commissioner can change promulgated rules. It takes a while to do that, but you can. So I would just ask you to just to talk through that as a group. Because again, if you put the things that we're going to put in our policy in the statute, which is what this was intended to be originally, that's is just a consideration. I will also just say that one of the other bills we're looking at is when we find people who are actively intoxicated or under the influence. That has been a basis in many of these cases where there is a no-use directive for the issuance of a warrant. And one of the things that if we look at this through a kind of a public health lens, what we want to do is ultimately grant the authority of agents to be able to put somebody on a detox hold, which is a health response. It's a welfare response, not a criminal justice response. Because at the end of the day, remember that agent is looking at this through the lens of, if a person's intoxicated, I'm responsible for allowing something to potentially happen. Because again, for some people, it becomes a thinking thing, right? I'm screwed, things are bad, and what we don't want people to do is make a bad decision, a situation that's tough already, bad. And so we would rather take a public health response to this, a health and welfare response, and use detox services or mental health placement or assessment. We can't put people on a hold for mental health, but we can put people on it. We could grant them the authority to put somebody on a hold for assessment at a mental health facility. That's better than locking somebody up because you're concerned about safety. So these are some of the things that we're looking at on the backside of this. So
Yeah, I thought we had the detox in there, but now it's fell out of this version.
because we have a bill that we drafted that was, and it probably because of that our bill, they probably pulled it out of this one. But it's going to be connected.
Yeah, and we need to talk more about this going forward, but the lack of services in some areas. The article today in the paper said that most counties in Minnesota don't have access to the heroin blocking,
Narcan.
well, and Suboxone and these things, right?
But Suboxone isn't hardly anywhere here in
Right.
the cities.
Yeah.
And then what happens when counties run out or whatever.
Yeah, and I agree, we have to think about some of these things, but you gotta kind of force counties to do some of these things too, right? That's
No,
what
I agree. I mean, we're using Suboxone and for MAT in prison right now.
Yeah.
But you also have to have enough providers to do that. There are absolutely
Anybody
no
can
providers.
prescribe OxyContin, right?
Yeah,
Oh
my God.
Suboxone. Oh, I
But
can't-
Suboxone, there's
Here's
a
enough
handful
Oxy
of
to
providers in the
last you a
state
year.
and a handful within the cities.
Yep. So that was that. I just would say, just to be again, Bill and I've talked a little bit about some of this, things like the county jails question where people serve violations. One of the things that we'll have to work out because we'll get pushback from counties on this, and it's funding, right? And so that stuff that, trust me, I would rather do that on short-term stuff than do it bringing people back in. The earned compliance credit. So just know that you have support on our side. I will tell you that there was an earned compliance credit task force that was done a number of years ago, and they just failed to get traction. I do think the bill certainly has language that we're supportive of. We wanted to do incentive-based stuff, and then the good part about this is that you're addressing, because what you're doing is if you want to take time off the back end of a sentence. Because remember, you're serving the full time, 1/3 of that is out in the community. We need to make sure that we are not obligated to provide supervision during that time. And supervised release is different than probation on that front.
Is everybody clear on that one? So right now in the bill, if you get out and you're for your 1/3 and you don't mess up, your supervision goes down and down and down gradually. And so you're no longer getting supervised as long as you keep doing the right things, right? And that would save money, and that would also not have someone on a ticky-tack thing 6 years into they're out, and then they get sent back on something.
Did you say that's only for probation, not
No,
parole?
this would be for supervised release.
Okay, all of it.
And then the only other thing I would just say is just to let you know kind of some of the things that are also being worked on. Community Justice Reinvestment Account. Well, we are 100% with you on that.
Well, that's not our idea.
That's not okay. It's not.
That's other people jamming stuff into.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Because we are just so you know we are working with. We're making a request to both the House, Senate leadership, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to support bringing in the Council on State Governments to talk about justice reinvestment models. And that really is about sustainable programming dollars and looking at state delivery systems. And so just some of these different kinds of range of issues as we think about this. And so we're hoping that we can do that, and that would address, and that would be made up of a broad spectrum of people, both legislative, community, and system folks, to be involved in those discussions to talk about how we develop a system that's more sustainable.
Who's convening those discussions?
Right now, we have to have, in order to get into those, we have to have a sign off from Senator Gazelka, from Speaker Hortman, and from the Chief Justice Gilday. And there have been in the past some resistance to some of that. Now we think that the way we're approaching this, there may be more support, and we're hopeful. So we're looking to make that request to help try and engage in this bigger conversation about how do you create a sustainable model that ultimately builds community capacity. So I don't have a timeline, but we're looking to begin making those asks for sign-offs in the coming weeks, the start of the session.
Obviously, we want to be at the table.
Well, trust me, you guys would be, and as representatives from this group, we would have, we, NAACP, the legislature, there's going to be a broad spectrum of folks, counties.
When you were pushing for the probation caps, Commissioner, how many times did you hear those 4 words, I'm for reform, but?
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
So we just want to make sure that everybody in the DOC too isn't using those words, because we already heard them, and it was jarring. Like, that's too complicated. Well, of course it's complicated. Criminal code went from this to this in 2 decades, so everything's really complicated.
I think the challenge, and I think some of that is we've had, it was just having Mark was walking into the office upstairs, we were having a conversation about just bills that we're working on, not even related to this stuff, but that we really feel strongly about, but that we know we're going to struggle, and we're going to struggle because of the but, and we're going to struggle because of the fact that there's so many moving pieces, and yet I'm going to, just like this group, I'm going to push and hope that we can get some traction and go from there. And I appreciate the fact that you're doing this, because I think this creates, again, as we talked about, we want to make sure that the things we put in place are good policy that ultimately reflects the long-standing best interest of the people in the system and the people in our state. And because, as pointed out, I'm not gonna, I have 3 years left, and I want to make the most of that, and then it's somebody else's turn. Yep.
Out of curiosity, we've been doing these community circles. David was at one yesterday. Would you all be open to doing that, where we could bring in stakeholders and they can use like us, like we're doing at this table, and they're a part of the conversation and just hearing from us, so that it's not just you that has to hear it, and maybe it'll help give them some more cultural awareness, if you will, and just maybe host a couple of those. Do you think they'd be open to something like that?
So with who you're talking about? Who's they as?
So like the stakeholders, maybe whoever you're talking to at the legislature, whoever the folks who are making the decisions about who's going to define what material means, those people. This could even extend beyond that, even into the correction department.
I think Deputy Commissioner Chapin could get that set
up. I know we've been specifically working on that in the juvenile world, because we've been tasked to look at significantly reducing racial and ethnic disparities here around the state. So that is something that we've been looking at in the adult world. We were just talking about this at one of our executive meetings about having that type of forum per se, where it's something that's maybe even quarterly. So that's something I would definitely could have a conversation about who those folks are, and could do what I can to try to get those folks around the table. Again, the legislators are going to be hard because it is a session, and but I think there is room to maybe get some other stakeholders who touch some of these same people along the continuum to be around this table to hear some of the same things that we hear, so that they become more invested into the work.
There's people on this table who have connections with folks on both sides of the aisle that you can bring in and say, we really need you to, we want you to hear this. I think it's a good thing to hear it. It's hard as hell to hear, but I think it's really good.
So you would be the one to coordinate with
I can do it.
All we need is the willingness for them to do it.
Yeah, we just have to organize.
Coordinate the space and the time.
Yeah, let's connect.
Yeah, if people have suggestions for us, Yolanda, Ed, and I, some other people have already met with 6, 7, 8 legislators. All of them said that first thing they say is, this has no chance in the Senate. We won't even get a hearing, so it won't be 2019 or 2020. It's just reality.
We know that most of the things we're proposing won't either.
No. So that's just, but we're building for the long run here.
And that, because I'm glad you said it, because that also becomes the part of the hurdle is making sure that when we talk about who we're going to convene in, it's not getting those who we know already are bought in. How do you get those legislators and those other, not just legislators, but even justice stakeholders at the table who aren't as amenable to this and who are just going to come in and we know that they're bought in? How do we get those others so we can have that conversation? Because if there are connections that other folks have to our folks on the other side of the aisle who would be willing to sit down for that conversation, then we should have that conversation about that outreach and how to get those folks at the table too.
I had a quick question before we move from out of this part. Have you all fully vetted out what your legislative agenda is?
Not completely. We have one more meeting with the governor and lieutenant governor just to wrap that up. And
is there any part of your agenda that should be of concern to this group that we could potentially help with in terms of power mapping or anything like that?
Yeah, I think once we get the nod, I will share it all with you, share the bill language with you, and we would welcome any support for any of the bills that you.
Bill, right?
What's that?
It's more than one bill, right?
Oh yeah, there's multiple bills, and we're also trying to be strategic about knowing it's a short session and what we have, because there's some stuff that we're really thinking about. What could our big agenda stuff look like? But we're laying some groundwork in this session, and so yes, there's a number of bills. And
we're gonna have a hearing on this one in March. Everyone will know about that. We are not asking for the Department of Corrections endorsement on this. This came from us. This came from all of our groups in here. We're not asking for their endorsement, but we're asking for their technical assistance.
And I would just say, look, we're gonna come in and be really clear about we want to support what we can support. And I mean, the framework around many of these things we've had many conversations about. I think we're in large scale agreement on. And so we want to do what we will support what we can and really just give voice to that. Just like you would do with the things that you could support that we're moving forward.
And I would say too, just keep your eyes too on stuff that's going on in the juvenile world too. I know we talk a lot in here about the adult bills, but there's a number of bills that will be introducing that the DOC supports, that the governor will be supporting, that's in the juvenile world too. Because ultimately, if we're going to have sustainable gains in the adult world, we have to cut off the feeding pipeline, those from our youth, and not just our youth up to 18, but also the age group from 18 to 24. In there. So just make sure that you're also keeping an eye, and we'll present those to you with bills that we have going on in the juvenile world, because that stuff is just as important, and sometimes it gets overlooked, and that continues to be a feeding ground for those who wind up and continue on the path and continue to have that imprint on those. So there's talk around stuff around EJJ right now, some changes around that I know a bunch of the legislators are interested in. That's our extended juvenile jurisdiction for our youth who have adult time hanging over their heads. So there's some things looking about that, because of the racial ethnic disparities that we see within those youth who typically fall into that category and who ultimately end up having that time executed. So there's a number of things, whether it's around shackling, DHS requirements. As you know, they process about 500,000 applications a year. So looking at those type of qualifications that make folks not amenable to do things like be a janitor, work at a school. So how do we sift through that? Looking at public records and things like that. Looking at things like raise the age for juvenile jurisdiction and those type of things. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on those bills for our youth.
Parole board, pardons. We're really going to make a big push on pardons. So there's a bunch of stuff that we really want to, and that I think we think are going to be important.
Cool. So we're going to get to that. I just want to say, I think it's really great that we're cooperating in this. And there's also things, as we all know, Kyle, and you certainly know, that are in this bill that could also be done by the DOC without legislation. Mm-hmm. And we know that that's not as sustainable, but also, come April, May, if these bills are not coming, we're probably going to come back to you and be like, okay, what's the timeline for implementing these things, so you can show the legislature that this is a good idea? So just, please, if you want to start thinking about implementation stuff, that would be great.
I think we're doing some implementation things.
Yeah, really? It could be more.
I'm sure.
We could exempt those violations, not accept it. Anyway, it sounds like we got
So-
one more item to add to.
Yeah,
the-
so just, it's past Josh's bedtime, but I just want to say that, so Josh, he's the assistant commissioner, he's really been working heavily on a lot of our stuff around strategic plan. And I'm gonna let Josh do this, he'll do it quick, and we would be asking for you tonight or even beyond tonight, to reach out to him if there are things that you think that where we missed the mark, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and I'm just gonna let Josh take it from there and just kind of go from there and just buzz through it kind of quickly and.
I'll go as fast as I can. Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Sturgeon, the commissioner. Because I would come tonight. I was here a few months ago and listened in. So I am not from corrections. I'm from the outside. I've been here about 8 months and have been doing a lot of listening. And I'm facilitating a series of conversations with a number of folks internally and now with you all and some others to kind of map out where does the agency go. So I thought what I would do is walk you through about a dozen or so slides just so I can do it quickly. And again, this is just the start of the process. So purpose of this presentation, really 4 things. We want to explain why we think the strategic planning process is important and should be important to you. Describe the process and timeline very briefly. Highlight some key features of a draft plan, and I underscore draft. None of this, most of this is not final. We're still in the stages of working through it, and you have a chance to give us your perspective and influence it. And then start generating some discussion and solicit some input. Again, we can do some of that tonight, but I know it's getting late. Like I said, we're at the beginning of the process. So why we think this is important, really create positive, lasting change. We talked about culture of the organization. So here's what we mean by that. Define where we are today, where do we want to be in the future, and how do we get there. So the commissioner talked about 3 years. So we're looking at a 2022 working backwards. So the framework here is at a high level, and 3 years coming backwards. There are a lot of important issues we deal with right now, but that's our framework for this conversation. So the process and timeline. So in year 1, so in 2019, we did a lot of listening and learning, a lot of conversations. The commissioners joined you in a number of discussions and a lot of other stakeholders. Here in early 2022, we need to produce a draft and start soliciting feedback and input from folks. We'll incorporate that input, and we need to finalize a plan in spring 2020, so the next couple of months. Then we want to track, report progress towards some of these key goals, and then refine and adjust, and then start that cycle all over, if that makes any sense. So we are up in that circled area. We are in the early stages of putting together a draft document, so this is a very timely conversation in that regard. And I want to just caveat, I've visited every single facility. I've spent time in classrooms with some of our students at Stillwater. I've spent a day with the lieutenants at Oak Park. I've met with many of our probation ISR agents. I've gone on a ride along. I've met with some of the people they've supervised. And one of my conclusions is what we're trying to do here is a huge paradigm shift for an organization that is this large. And that is that we basically want to think through what could the future look like and be better, and then how do you implement that. So this is new and it's different, and there's some capacity here that we don't have that we need to build and develop over time. So we're really talking about readiness for change and how do we align 4,300 employees and 10,000 people who are in our facilities and hundreds of agents. How do we ready them for doing things differently? And so I just shared this chart that up there, all the way from the unaware of where we want to be to up on the upper right, advocacy and ownership. And we're probably in that between unaware and aware box. And some system change, cultural change, to be honest with you. So here are some highlights, some key highlights of this draft plan that we'll share with you. One, in terms of communicating with stakeholders, we want to define for a minute what's the mission, what's the vision. We'll talk a little bit about some strategy and where are we going and some objectives. So we've updated the mission of the Department of Corrections. And that's really, why does this agency exist? And our proposal is really to transform lives for a safer Minnesota. And so people are sent to our organization. Once we get them, how are we helping to change their lives so that when they go back into the community, they're better off? That's really the mission. It may not be where we're at today, but it's where your input and what your guidance has.
I would juxtapose that to the traditional kind of focus on recidivism.
Yeah.
We really are trying to talk about how we make better neighbors, right? How do we that's the transformation. And that also demands something of the community.
So in terms of a vision, it describes what success looks like in the future, even and most likely if that's not possible today, it takes considerable effort. And this is some language the commissioner came up with, and achieving justice through promotion of racial equity, restoration from harm, and community connectedness. Some values. What we mean by that is articulates the agency's moral compass. Values help distinguish between right and wrong, determine what behaviors to reward. We define these 7: safety, equity, dignity, fairness, honesty, respect, and service. Pretty straightforward. Doesn't mean we necessarily live up to these values every single day, but it gives us a guidepost in terms of working with our staff and everyone else. In addition to this, the commissioner shared, and we may, I'm not going to pass that around, but a list of 27 kind of I statements. So if we talked about organizational culture, which comes down to how we treat one another, staff to staff, supervisor to staff to an inmate, an agent to a client in the field, and we heard from just about everybody that they're not satisfied with the organizational culture. So these I statements the commissioner laid out give people some higher expectations about how to treat one another. And so that has been circulated. We've had generated, as you can imagine, quite a bit of discussion and feedback. That's healthy. Some of it wasn't always positive, but it was healthy. So strategic priorities, what we mean by that, 2 kind of main areas for creating positive impact on performance towards achieving that vision. We set 2 priorities: deliver exceptional public service, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and improving organizational culture. We use the term organizational culture deliberately, and based upon all of our assessments, we have got a culture problem. And I've said that in every single setting and meeting that I've been in, whether it's a warden, whether it was with union members, whether it was with some of the folks that were here to serve. So we set the 3 strategic kind of initiatives under delivering exceptional public services: engage community stakeholders and agency partners, like we're doing here tonight. 2, provide transformative programming, which is going to be critical in order if you want to change people's lives. And 3, promote safety for victims. And then 4th, secondarily, improving organizational culture. We recognize if our staff aren't healthy and well, if they're not being held to a higher standard, that they then can't carry out their jobs to the best of their ability and bring on positive impact. So we focus very heavily on organizational culture, and what we define is in safety all around. How do we recruit and retain talented staff at all levels? Promote staff wellness. If staff are well, then again, they're better off in a place to bring around better programming, etc. Promote servant leadership, which I can discuss in a minute. And then modernize organizational processes and structures. As we have come into, like I said, I'm new to the agency, as is the commissioner. As we've come into the agency and we've kind of dug under the hood, there's a lot of antiquated systems and processes that need to be modernized. It didn't take over, it didn't break overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but it's going to be critical in terms of bringing around some positive change. Let me give you just a couple of samples and then I'll wrap up here. So here's an example. Here's a sample of what we talk about in terms of initiative, goals, and objectives that we're going to be working with our leadership and then ultimately the organization. So in terms of improving safety, the goal here, the draft goal, is protect all staff, inmates, and clients under community supervision from suffering harm and injury. And we lay out some very concrete, measurable objectives, and then ultimately for accountability purposes, we'll have people assigned who's responsible for taking care of and following through on some of these objectives, and then reporting progress. I'll just kind of run through this here real quickly. I'll hit a few. This is practice servant leadership. So by definition of servant leadership, what we mean by that is that leader's job is to put the focus on others, as opposed to having others put the focus on leaders. Governor Walz, when he campaigned for governor, talked about it. It's one of his priorities that he brought into office, informed by his time as a public school teacher, Command Sergeant Major, Army National Guard, and as he is taking, working within the various different agencies of the organization, has asked us to take a look at it. We believe that leadership matters greatly, and so how the top leadership then works with people who report to us, and all the way down the chain of command. If we can turn some of that paradigm upside down, it can have a positive impact on the things that you care deeply about. And we're working with some folks on the outside of corrections in the community who have had some success with this to give us some guidance. And finally, engage community stakeholders. We've set that a goal to increase engagement of the public, particularly those impacted by our programs and creation and revision of our programs, policies, and decisions. So just so you can see, we're setting that starting to set that as a goal for ourselves, and then setting some objectives and ways to track it. You ultimately will hold us accountable on whether or not we're making progress in that regard. And then finally, in terms of provide transformative programming, a lot of what we talked about here tonight, I'll point to, for example, that second one under goals, I'll just read it. Increase the number of people released from prison who within 30 days obtain meaningful employment, enroll in educational programming, or actively engage in community-based treatment by 90%. Again, this is a draft, things will be tweaked. You'll see next to that as an objective, and I'll just share this quick little story.
Is that currently tracked right now, that data set?
One of the things that we've discovered is we really don't have good performance data. In other words, no, not to the degree that we're satisfied with, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to change.
We think we can, and we think we can create dashboards that people can see this and look at it.
But these are the types of things we want to track and then make publicly available. It's going to take time on it, but I want to just share just a very brief story of something that was very moving for me. So if you see under the objective next to increase the number of people released from prison, it says deepen public-private partnerships with building and construction trades to expand apprenticeships. And this brothers and sisters in the union movement came to meet with us to talk about they can't find enough people to hire to get living wage union paid jobs with good health care benefits to build buildings and fix roads. That same week when I was meeting with students in Stillwater who were going through the classes, I asked them what's one of the things that we could do as an agency to maybe help give them a better chance for a successful life once they get out. And they said, well, can I get a good job in the building and construction trades? So in the same week, we heard from both stakeholder groups that was something that would be important for us to expand. So we added that as an objective to explore maybe refreshing some partnerships there in a way that could be a win-win. Again, this is very early thinking, and you're seeing this on the front end, not the back end. In that regard. And then in terms of discussion and input, I know we're running towards the end, and again, I can come back and we can find other opportunities, but open-ended questions are kind of just generally what are your questions, what's your reactions, what's missing, and how do we make some of these priorities actually happen? What are the action steps? What are some of the accountability potentials? With that, I'll stop and be glad to send any questions to the commissioner or Chris.
Do you want to send that to us so we can?
Yeah, we're still working through it. We'll be making we'll make this publicly available. We're still tweaking and drafting.
We are headed to the governor's office too, and they have to give us but we wanted to make sure we're talking about it.
And Steph and then Larry and then last.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I would add is we've had a number of complaints, we were just talking about one a second ago, of the concept of industry job training being taken away as punishment for some sort of whatever. that's an issue that I don't know if it's DOC policy or it's happening in a place like Stillwater where they say, the warden says, or whoever says, oh, this is a disciplinary issue, or you all are on lockdown, or whatever the case may be. Now, all of that opportunity to work one of these jobs that you're talking about is taken away. I think that's an obnoxious and terrible form of punishment that, again, goes against what we claim to want to do in society. We want people working, we want people to learn these skilled trades. So I don't understand why you would withhold that as punishment for whatever disciplinary is.
Larry, and then me.
One of the things I see missing from that plan is, you know, you talk about dignity, safety, you talk about these things, but one of the things that you're going to have to give these guys is empowerment. You know, you have programs in there, you have POP in there, giving empowerment, teaching people how to use their power in appropriate ways. And I've seen the results of that in many POP guys. I haven't been through the program, but I've worked with guys that have been through the program. You know, we act out as men when we're young because we want power. We've been disenfranchised for so long, we do stupid stuff, we act out because we pick up a gun, we do these things because we don't know power, but we want to grab our power back. So we have to teach inmates how to use their power in appropriate ways. We have to teach them that they have power, that they have, you know, that goes right along hand in hand with dignity.
That they're important.
Most of us around this table right now are POP guys.
Yeah.
Well, a few of us, there's a handful of us.
And what are you doing with your empowerment? Exactly. You're sitting here at the table, not out in the street with a gun saying, I'm going to take power this way. And that's something that you've really got to instill in inmates, is that you don't have to act out. You don't have to do stupid things when you go back out on the street, that you can exercise your power and you can have the things you want in life, the good life.
That's right.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Wayne?
A few weeks ago, we had a Martin Luther King event at the TV studio, and I'm not going to go into full details, but during one of the Q&As, somebody said that they were asked a question one time, why would their people destroy their community in the protest, like people, riots and stuff like that? He said, because we don't feel like we're worth anything. We don't own anything, we're not a part of anything, we don't feel empowered. It basically kind of what Larry said. And that person said this during one of our events. We had a big discussion about stuff. It was really deep.
They don't feel heard.
So
they don't feel heard.
Do a time check. Do people want to stay longer? It seems like there's a couple other hands. I'm fine with that if people do. But can we set?
We have a cut time. What type of cut time?
What is our cut time?
15 minutes past per hour.
That shows.
8:15.
Yeah, and can we just say next time is April 16th?
Sure.
Or did it?
I just have one thing. I saw you had hands-on training.
Yes.
You know, probably utilizing better takedown strategies and things, and extraction strategies and things of this nature. Can you just go back to that slide really quick?
April 16, you said?
Yeah, April 16th, Thursday at 6 p.m.
Right. It was the first slide. This one right here.
Yeah, provide
And
more
so-
hands-on training,
And
course,
so,
existing staff.
what I'm saying missing from here is the opposite of hands-on. And that's, you know, I was working security and Aqua and inside of 7 Sushi Lounge, and one of the things that we would try to do is talk the person out of the club, and so it's verbal jujitsu. De-escalation.
That's been around for like
So
20 years.
what I'm seeing missing here is
By hands-on, we mean
Scenario.
experiential. Scenario-based, not sitting in a classroom falling asleep looking at the screen.
Not literally putting your hands on people,
Yes.
but
It's that.
Because you know,
experiential.
police
I thought the
officers,
same
when they
thing.
say hands-on.
But yes, but techniques about de-escalation response.
Because I'm still not seeing that. You know, I'm not seeing
This is
that.
a really high level, but what you're saying.
There's beyond this, then there's a series of other things that you will, action steps that you would see.
It's just part of it, so
Okay.
Excuse me, I was out in the hall, and so I didn't catch all of this, but does this have anything to do like what Lionel Lakes is doing? Lionel Lakes has a program where some of the inmates work with Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
Does this have anything to do with that?
No, it's not the same thing.
Oh.
It's not the same thing, but I
Okay,
mean,
thank
that's one of the programs that,
Right.
we have.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
One of the things I think to consider is when you were mentioning like juvenile justice, and so when I've noticed this, having worked in corrections for 20 years previously, JDAI, Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, made a lot of changes broadly on the front end of decreasing overall children in locked up facilities for the most part. So essentially somewhat addressing disparities, but not really, because all the numbers dropped. But there's no alternatives. There have not been enough good or solid alternatives, and my fear is this would be something very similar. Is without the back end or of what's gonna happen and who's supporting that and how is it funded, nothing will really change or benefit the inmates' clients themselves.
So I would say this is courtesy life with JDAI for the last number of years, but I would just say this, that one of the things we learned, and one of the reasons why we're doing this whole thing with with funding up those counties to buy resources and develop a new plan is exactly that, because what was missing was the alternative. And we did a little J and a little Dave, a little D, but the A just never happened.
No, you're right on, and that was in the commissioner's spot on, which is the investment into to our counties who are going to be, because, and you know what we touched on at the panel, you know, making sure that we have the community involved who are closest, you know, to the problems. And so how can we make sure that the money that we're having is going back into the community where ultimately our people will be returning to, and that's where the development and the sustainability of these alternatives actually live, and making sure that, you know, and that's why I say bring your ideas, that those alternatives are outside of the box and are cultural specific and are gender specific, so that those who are tasked with going into them actually feel like this is something that is actually for me and not just something that was created as a way to say that you're doing something.
I have two quick requests for our next meeting, because we've been talking about this already, right? But as we brought up here, this is on the community too, right? So next time, let's bring these ideas about what we're gonna do in the community when people get decarcerated, and not make the same mistakes we did with deinstitutionalization. Have you seen the reports on people that got out of mental facilities and how many ended up incarcerated, how many ended up homeless? We can't repeat those same mistakes, and so that's on us in the community to make sure. Well, it's on you to make sure they're getting funded, but it's on us to make sure we're having these. And then the second one, this subject of bad actors came up a lot today, and it's not enough just to yell at the commissioner. We have to think of ideas here in the community to deal with bad actors. Yolanda's brought some up about union training and stuff, but you know, it's easy to just say, well, fire them, but that's not going to happen, right? And so we need to think of some ideas here on how we can deal with these bad, because I think it's true. I mean, the anecdotes are piling up here. When Isaiah signed on to our bill, a whole bunch of people from Isaiah immediately sent us stuff about bad actors in the system. You remember Mike Sorrow?
Yes.
When did you come on the force?
I remember.
Yeah. I mean, think of what he did to Tony. I think Tony Bouza had some good ideas, and think about what a guy like Mike Sorrow, who just, when I went to college in 1995, my dad warned me about Mike Sorrow. Be careful for this guy, he's gonna beat you over the head, right? He destroyed that whole reform movement, and so some bad actors can really do a lot of damage. So we need to think of some ideas here for this next meeting, send them to David, because David loves this stuff.
I think we got it back there.
Yeah.
Hold on, we got a question back there.
Where's the sign-up sheet?
It's over here.
It's right here.
Great, I just need to make sure we got it, and then, like, I don't have anything more to say.
Along the same lines, it's really saying, what I see missing here is any mention about accountability, like any grievances and those kinds of things, and oversight, like a strong system of oversight to ensure that there's follow-up and follow-through consequences when these things happen. It should be clearly outlined and not ambiguous as far as, you know, systematic, habitual infractions and those kinds of things. In order for you to achieve any of those goals that you have in this presentation, you'll need to deal with that. Otherwise, even if it is funded.
It is in there, just so you know. You only saw a portion of them, but that one is specifically in there. Let me just say one thing on the kite stuff, just because I think, because for many of you have people who are in and it's impacting, and something that's, I think, timely. So as you all heard, there's this change shift going on with the tablet stuff, right? Everybody's gonna get a tablet. Everybody is getting one. Nobody's buying them, they're getting them. And so you're gonna get the tablets. Now, I'm not saying you're gonna get to do everything for free. I'm not saying any of that stuff, because I don't want to, but I'm saying everybody's getting that tablet. And one of the things that's gonna be built into that tablet, the plan is that we're gonna do electronic management of kites. So what that does is it creates a mechanism where tracking and management of those kites can be done very differently, and we're not dealing with paper that can be intercepted and all those different types of things. So we think that again, it's not gonna happen on day one, but we have talked about this, that an application has to be there for kite management as part of the tablet, and you'll be able to identify who gets checked off on that, and we go from there.
There's a number of individuals who they're not able to create, kites themselves, so they get assistance from other people who sit down. I probably did 1,000 of them or more to sit down and help individuals write kites. And so if it's going to switch to a digital format, I know one of the rules is against one person being in possession of another person's tablet. And so there's a number of individuals, especially in the education units, who they're not going to be able to take the tablets and create kites. They're going to need assistance from people.
We'll make sure we talk about that, because that's a really good idea.
That's a good idea.
Don't have access to any communication via JPay or anything currently, are they still going to be granted those tablets moving forward?
Yes, everybody will get a tablet, everybody will.
Good, that'll stop the strong
I was
one.
gonna ask, are the kites, are they gonna be, can you send it directly out to you or the ombudsman?
Yes, there will be, there's mechanisms for that. Maybe a separate one for the ombudsman. There could be, because again, here's the thing I would just, and again, I'm Markins to speak for myself, he's the ombudsman, but because one of the things we have to do, remember, is that that's a new office too. And the last thing we want to do is a little bit so we copy everybody in the chain, and me, and then the ombudsman. Now, who is intervening, right? Because
it's similar to what the commissioner was saying about the appeal process. You don't want to you want to have a good system that's sustainable and that's working. So you don't want to undermine that process by inserting somebody else too early in the process. If that makes sense. So that's what we're looking at. When are we going to take grievances after, typically, depending on the situation, after the grievance process has already been followed, because we want DOC to have that good process. That doesn't mean that through taking these complaints, we might not discover that their things aren't working within the grievance process itself, and then we can make recommendations for that. But to the commissioner's point, we would just be wasting a lot of people's time if we complain right away.
I mean, because what my concern is, a lot of times what happens is the kite goes out, and then especially when was a complaint against an officer, it'll stay in the DOC. I'm wondering, are you gonna make sure that it gets out of there?
Well, the ombuds has authority to see all of any DOC records. That's part of the statute.
Thank you everyone very much.
I would say if you can, go out and see the movie Just Mercy. You can see the whole system at work. You can see it through the courts, the jails, ISR, and even in the community. It's a really good movie.
Our church is doing it in the book club too.
Oh, nice, nice.
See the movie and read the book. We're also doing Treehouse.
Oh, nice.
That's a good program.
Mr. Larry got a hug. Mr. Larry got a hug. How are you doing, Tashara? Oh, wow. Nice seeing you.
All right, it's time to go home. It's late, man.